Meeting to order. Senator Morrissey, would you like to introduce your amendment?
Good afternoon, Chairman Reagan and members of the committee. I am Senator Chuck Morse, representing District 22, towns of Salem, Pelham, Atkinson, and Plastow. I'm here today to offer an amendment, number 1475S, to House Bill 1661. The bill addresses career and technical education centers. Our friends in the House added a parking garage to this bill. They appropriated $35 million to do what they thought would be the whole project. What the Senate's proposing and working with Representative Umberger is that we appropriate $9.35 million to the Department of Administrative Services to cover the preliminary design, engineering, and site work for the project. This would include design and engineering for a new 450 space parking garage on the site of the current DOJ building, engineering for demolishing Storage Street, the cost of tearing down the DOJ building, and the cost of moving the Department of Justice to leased offices. This non-lapsing appropriation will allow DAS to get to work and give the next legislature the information it needs to include the full project in the next capital budget. This is a prudent use of surplus funds for a project that we can't afford to put off any longer. I thank you for your consideration and ask for your support.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. I think this is just such a great way to go and solves a lot of problems. So the understanding on line 27 is that the lease costs are going to be ongoing, but that will be covered in the regular budget.
Yes, the lease cost where DOJ is moving to, well, there's a lot going on there, Senator, and you can decide next year. You may be purchasing that building.
Yeah, that's,
so I think you have to look at that.
so maybe there won't be lease costs. Okay, good, thank you. Very good.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Oh, thank you. That was my question, Senator Morse. In the lease, is there a lease purchase arrangement?
The DOJ said it'll take a couple of months to arrange those documents after we get through this legislative session. But I believe what's going to be proposed is you have the opportunity to buy all or most of the building they're moving into between $15 and $20 million, or we can go over there in a lease that's very favorable for the state too. So it's really, you're going to be looking at two numbers next year. One is the build out of the parking garage, and two is, do we buy that building?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gary?
Thank you. If we pass this and get the design work all done, I mean, that's basically labor. Cost of materials right now is sky high. How long could we expect if someone came back with a quote on what it would cost to do that garage? How long could we expect that those numbers would hold up? Would they be going down? Would we expect it to go up?
Well, here's the problem you have, and the cost of hiring this company, which is in here to do the design. Are we building a 400, 500, or 600 space parking garage? Because the way it was presented in the House was 600. And I'm not even convinced you could put 600 cars on the streets out here into a parking garage. So you need to work through that. I think Charlie can answer how long that process is going to take. We did have a company on board before COVID that we were going to use to do this, but I think you have to determine what you're building first, and we don't know.
Representative Umberger, did you wish to add anything to the amendment? Yeah, you're good.
The only thing that I will add, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Representative Karen Umberger, and I represent Carroll County District 2, the towns of Conway, Eaton, Chatham, and Hales Location, all those big places up north. So, the only thing I would like to add is that we did, in fact, work closely with DAS to come up with the costs that are identified here. And I think that that these costs are reasonable, and that as we go through the project, for example, engineering, may be not 1.4 million, but maybe 1.6 million. And so we're trying to, that's why as we move the money to DAS, that they will be able to spend it as required. Obviously, as if I had my druthers, I would prefer the 35 million, but that didn't seem to fly over here on this side of the house. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Senator Reagan, members of the committee, Aaron Hennessy, State Senator District 1. I am here to talk about the underlying bill before the parking garage was put on it. And I have an amendment, which I hope all of you have before you, number 1590S.
No.
Okay, I apologize. My aide was supposed to give that to you. I'm just going to tell them what it does and then, okay. In the underlying bill, which I apologize, I don't have it. Do you have it? Can I have a bill? Thank you. So I can tell you where it is that I'm making a change. Okay. If you look at on page 1, on line 9, or actually line 10, it says that the technical education agreement, which will be renewed every 4 years and submitted to the commissioner for review and approval. In discussion with my CTE schools up in the North Country, they would like me to add or another time period agreed upon by the receiving and sending school. 4 years is a short period sometimes, and given that these schools set up these programs and want to get commitments from the sending schools, and likewise sending schools want a longer time period commitment from the receiving school, they would, if it's agreeable to both of the sending and the receiving, they would like to be able to enter into a longer time period for agreement.
Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. I kind of wrote this bill in large part with Representative Ladd and Representative Umberger, and we had pretty thorough hearings in the House. And one of the reasons we did the 4 years is because that's in accordance with the Perkins cycle, and that was very important as a statewide cycle. And then secondly, since these agreements have to be, reviewed and approved by the commissioner, that it seemed important that we have this process there. And we actually, the 4 years was something that seemed to be a very important compromise in terms of selecting that time frame. So unless this is something Representative Ladd has agreed to, which I haven't heard about, but I things are on the fly right now.
Right.
But I have some reservations, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Thank you for the comments on it. The The bill doesn't stipulate when in a 4-year time period that it has to be done. So to your point of the grants, it doesn't say it has to line up with the grant cycle. So I get your point on that. So if you would like it to do that, maybe there's some different language we could use here. But I did receive comments from my CTE schools in the North Country, and there'll be another one soon, that sometimes 4 years is too short of a period for them.
And if I just may, Mr. Chairman, I was at the hearing in the House. Did they bring this up at that point?
They did not bring it up in the House because I said I would bring it up in the Senate. It is sometimes too difficult to go down to a hearing for people in the North Country, and I'm not sure if they submitted written testimony.
Don't see any.
In the House, my apologies.
So you want to round up that amendment and give it to us?
I will get this amendment to you, and my apologies. My aide said he had sent it to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative, she didn't ask to speak. Okay. Commissioner Erlinghouse and Ms. Rantamaki.
Hi, Charlie Arlinghouse, Commissioner of Administrative Services, and who are you?
Karen Rantamaki, Director of Plant and Property.
Karen's determined to stay safe before her vacation, so she doesn't have to stay home. We're here because most of the numbers in here are ours. We did estimates from Public Works. We will be in charge of executing the lease. We have reasonable numbers on lease payments, and I'm here mostly to answer questions you have about what would happen next, what's the condition of the garage, what happens to the old bank building, et cetera, et cetera. So we worked with Terry Paff did a lot of work on this. A lot of people know that, and sort of Terry's thing for 30 years. We worked with them on what it would cost to demo the buildings, what would it cost to build a new garage, what would it cost to do all of that. In 2019, we had a hearing on selecting engineers, which is governed by 21I-22, I think, one of the provisions of the Admin Services Statute. We selected an engineering firm, which was Scott and Partners, with a garage consultant, and then the going forward was suspended. This was about 6 months before COVID happened, but the proposal would be to restart with them because those people did a lot of work doing presentations. So we would use them again, do a lot of design work on what would a 400 space, 500 space, 600 space garage look like, and do all of that work, and then do the design work on tearing things down, on closing Capitol Street, and on design work on landscaping it, because we're not just going to close the street and leave it there. So, but I'm here to answer questions.
So the first question that came to my mind was, what happened to the original idea to just knock the thing down and put up a parking garage? And why are we all of a sudden splitting the costs up when we had the cash to pay cash for it and get that done?
That's a good question. I think that's a political decision that my understanding is that the House was in favor of that, where we would tear down the building and build a garage all in one fell swoop. And I think that the Senate looked at it and said, the thing we need to do now, the engineering work will take engineering design, architecture, et cetera, will take a long time. And so the building process could be handled as either part of the capital budget or part of some other budget. I know there's some people who want to pay cash, and I know there's some people who want to bond it. And I'm not here to tell you one of those is better than the other. That's sort of a legislative decision.
Thank you, Mr. Charlie, based on that comment, you run the risk of coming up to a capital budget and taking a significant percentage of that capital budget for this project, where the option is you could have done it with cash and eliminated the capital budget and provided more space in the budget for other needy things. I mean, I think that's a dilemma that we face, because the treasurer always, sets limits on the capital budget, and our capital budgets have been fairly robust in the past couple of years. So, is there any consideration at this point in time?
I think that, and it is a consideration, the capital budget is typically set at around 125 million, give or take. And, some big chunk of that increasingly is for IT projects. And so let's say there's about 90 million left for sort of old-fashioned capital projects, if you will, the kind we like, as opposed to the kind Dennis Goulet likes. There's a chunk. We faced this with Concord Steam in the past. We faced it with the RIMS project and how much of the capital budget that eats up. I think if you're going to pay cash for the garage, and I understand that revenues are fairly robust, is my understanding, without a revenue report in front of me. But if you were to pay cash, you can make that decision now. You can make that decision in January. You can make it. I don't think by doing this you're forestalling the opportunity to pay cash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gary?
What's the anticipated completion date of the design work?
I think we would, a lot of it depends on how it goes, but I would think that we could probably, 9 months. If we start more or less right away, 9 months, and theoretically you could maybe do it in 6. I know that there's a lot of potential not to let the grass grow under anybody's feet. Because of the nature of this project, there'll be a lot of legislative involvement and concern about the way a garage might look. If you're gonna place a parking garage, which are typically particularly ugly structures, in the middle of a historic district next to some of the most historic buildings, City Hall, State House, et cetera, you probably want to spend a lot of time on design, and there'll be a lot of back and forth. If the back and forth happens quickly, and there'll be legislative involvement in that, obviously, and everybody else, it'll happen faster. And if it happens slowly, it'll happen slower. But 6 to 12 months is a good bet, with 9 months as a good guesstimate.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Similar question to what I asked Senator Morse. Is now the best time to do this with the prices so high on all materials?
It's a good question. Obviously, supply chain and pricing is something that we look at every day. I had a meeting with procurement this morning, looking at a presentation on issues with prices. There are good times and there are bad times, and it's hard to predict. If you know what's going to happen with pricing on steel and on asphalt and on petroleum, I could tell you the answer to that question. But I think 2 things are going to happen. Prices might go up and prices might go down. And the one would make it a good time and the other would make it a bad time. And I don't think we know right now. I think from a state standpoint, we have a lot of projects going through Public Works, ARPA funding, et cetera. And we bid the best we can to mitigate pricing the best we can. But if prices are going to continue to skyrocket, now is the time to do this. If prices are going to plummet in a year and a half, then we should wait and do it in a year and a half. The engineering, though, is not price sensitive, right? The engineering doesn't make a difference. And I think that we're in a weird world right now. None of us have dealt with inflation. Inflation hasn't really been an issue from a policy-making standpoint, affecting consideration since 1982, probably. And none of us are old enough to remember that, remember budgeting in those days. None of us are old enough to remember that.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Seeing none, thank you.
If you have more questions, we're right across the street, literally.
We have an amendment from Representative Heath. Who's not here. What? Representative Heath, are you Representative Heath? No, okay. I bet. And I don't see Representative Ladd or Luno. Well, let's hear from who else is here. Dan McGuire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I'm here on behalf of Granite State taxpayers, the state's oldest statewide taxpayer organization founded by Governor Thompson and Senator Lovejoy. We're opposed to the general concept in this bill, and specifically the total cost of the parking garage. I mean, not the other part of the bill, obviously, but the parking garage is what I'm here to talk about. Even with the amendment slows things down, which seems to me a possibly good idea to allow wiser heads to prevail. But it doesn't seem to change the basic number of the $35 million to build this parking garage. Now, in the House, it was said that the parking garage would be 600 spaces. This amendment says 450 spaces, but the current parking garage is 200 spaces. So this is not just for the legislature. This is a parking garage that will also be for staff and others. And so it's a tremendously expansion in the number of parking spaces. Now, some of the expense, which seems to us very silly, is to take a serviceable building that the Justice Department uses and destroy it and have all these extra costs to move the Justice Department and pay rent for them and so on. I mean, if you look in the amendment here, there's roughly $6 or $7 million plus an ongoing $1.2 million annually just for that part, just to locate it in that particular spot. So it seems to me you shouldn't be buying something without considering alternatives. And a simple alternative would be to replace the current garage with another garage in the same spot. It could even be bigger. The current garage has 2 levels of parking. Why not make 3? If you need more parking, make 3 levels of parking. But it's not going to cost anywhere near $35 million, right? $35 million for 600 spaces would be $60,000 per space. For 450 spaces, what is it, $80,000 a space? I mean, it's just, these kind of numbers just don't make any sense. And they're not the style of, we don't spend this kind of money foolishly. This is money taken from the taxpayers, and I agree that this proposal would be more comfortable for the legislature, but is this really the kind of thing you want to spend money on? I mean, Senator D'Alessandro says if this went to the regular capital budget, it would have to compete with other things, and this wouldn't even necessarily rise to the top. So if it's not good enough for the regular capital budget, how is it good enough to just spend as a special, sort of? Anyways. So I think there can be alternatives, and I think the alternatives would be much cheaper than what's proposed here, because not only do you have to destroy a building and move it and move the people and so on, but because the building's in that location, it's got to have granite facing, it's got to look very nice, there's a lot of extra cost in the architecture and so on. Whereas if it's in the existing location or a similar location, It's just going to be pre-stressed concrete with steel, and it's going to be a parking garage, right? It doesn't have to be $35 million. Okay, it can be a fraction of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Thank you. And David Warrender. Mr. Speaker, did you wish to?
I do, I'm sorry I'm a little late, but when you get a chance, Mr. Chairman.
You'll be next. You'll be last.
So thank you. I'm just going to really briefly speak on the CTE portion of the bill. My name is David Warrender. I'm the director of the Jalva Hewitt Career and Technical Center in Laconia, position I've been very fortunate to hold for the past 9 years. I want to thank everyone who's worked so hard on this important piece of legislation and seeing it move forward. We really appreciate seeing such a high level of support for career-based education in our state. The Hewitt Center serves 7 high schools in the Lakes region with an annual enrollment of between 400 and 450 students. Over 35% of the students in our region will take a class at the Hewitt Center at some point in their high school career. Our center is fortunate to have strong industry support as well as good working relationships with all schools who send students to the center. CTE is built around authentic and often hands-on learning, where we need students to be physically present to fully engage in much of the instruction we offer. And while we do have very positive working relationships with our regional schools, we do see calendar non-alignment as an ongoing concern. HB 1661 helps bring this issue to the forefront, along with promoting other activities that will strengthen career readiness in our state. It will help assure that the needs of students in CTE programs and our region's overall career development pipeline continues to be a priority, even as leadership in individual schools may change. So on behalf of the students and staff of the Hewitt Center, I want to thank you for your work on this legislation, and we look forward to a future where we have more time and consistency to help students achieve their career aspirations.
Questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm just going to speak on the parking garage. Trust me, when I became speaker, I did not think I'd have to be worried about building a parking garage. But the situation has arisen that we have a structure over there that is becoming worse and worse every year. And it does have a lifespan. Now, the estimated time, as Mr. Arlene House has said, to probably realistically put this new parking garage up is probably going to be maybe 2.5, 3 years. If the lifespan of that garage we have over there now might be another 3 to 5 years, then we're going to be in trouble. We have an opportunity now to move the Attorney General into a space that is adequate, that suits their needs. They've already been over there along with Mr. Arlene House, and they've looked it over. It's one of the few places left in the city of Concord that has enough space to move them into. So if we lose this, you have 2 options. Either you lose the ability for representatives to park at some point, or you build a new building for the Attorney General's office, which will cost twice as much as what we might be able to purchase this building in the future. As far as the $35 million go, that was the initial estimate. We're hoping it comes in a little bit cheaper than that, and it very might. Well, this $9.3 million that's in here gets us to the point of our next budget where we can hopefully have an estimate, or somewhere in that vicinity have an estimate of what it might actually cost to put the garage itself up. Now that assuming we moved the Attorney General, we did the, all the work as far as the people that are going to put this structure together and give us an accounting of it. I would rather pay this thing in cash. That would be my my goal to do that. But we can figure that out in the next budget. I've been criticized for trying to push this thing forward without going through the, the capital budget process. If we wait and go through the capital budget process, then the building that we want to move the Attorney General into is probably going to be taken by somebody else, and then we'll have no place to move the Attorney General, and the whole project comes to a stop. And I do not want to be the speaker when representatives come to me and say, I have no place to park. We already have to have shut down certain spaces over there, and we don't have enough parking spaces over there to begin with, as many of you who have been House members remember. So this is something that's been in the making for a while. That garage was put up in, I think it was 1975. So it's, just by using the numbers, it's getting close to its end of life. We've had to put a sizable amount of money in every year just to stabilize it. And is it safe now? Yes. Is it going to be safe 3 years from now? I don't think any of us knows. And then the question is, how much money are we going to have to keep putting into it? The city of Concord really wants the space back. And we've already talked to the mayor, we've talked to the, the town manager of Concord. They would really want that space back. I mean, the thing's going to have to be torn down. If we were to move that route, tear it down, and then build a new building, where would we put everybody for the 2 years or so that it's going to take to do it? We've bounced this thing back and forth a lot. I mean, obviously, I've had numerous conversations with the Senate President, and I think this is the most practical and logical way to go. Did I want to spend this kind of money? No, but is it something that really should and really has to be done at some point? Yes.
Questions for the speaker?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you address the prior witness talking about tearing the existing structure down and rebuilding on that site? Why it's impractical?
Well, that would mean like first of all, number one, the city of Concord really wants that space back. They want to try and develop the bottom of it, even though we have a contract. I guess they call it an air contract. For $1 a year or whatever it is. They want the space back, and if we tore that down and we had to rebuild it, I have no idea where we'd put 300 House members to park while it was being done and rebuilt. We have no place to put them. Right now, we have about 70 parking spaces on the street. Concord wants some of them back, for people that have handicapped issues and stuff like that. And we're hoping to address all those issues in the new garage, plus maybe keep a few of the spots. But Concord wants the Store Street back, and Concord wants some of the parking spaces back that we have. It's an unfortunate dilemma that we've been thrown into, and I mean, we have to be realistic about fixing it.
One more question. Sure. Does the state lease the property that the existing garage is on, or is there some sort of agreement?
It is, and I guess maybe Charlie could answer that better than I could, but if I'm correct, Charlie, it's called an air lease or something like that?
We have air rights.
Air rights, yeah.
At least to air rights.
I'm learning stuff I never thought I'd have to learn.
Air rights. Got it.
And the parking garage wasn't one of them, but I'm learning.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Chris Dodge.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Chris Dodd. I'm the Career and Technical Education Director at Salem High School. I've served in that position for the last 15 years. very familiar with career and technical education. I did work very closely with Senators Ladd, Senators Waters, and the Joint Committee on Tuition and Transportation for Career and Technical Education on the original bill, which has changed quite a bit over the last few weeks. And I'm speaking, I wasn't intending to speak today, but the amendment that came to light presented by Senator Hennessy, I won't say it struck concern, but there's just a few fundamental things. Being in the 11th hour, I'm not sure where my colleagues stand on that in terms of that. What I can say is that changing it from a 20-year agreement to a 4-year agreement is definitely a step in the right direction. I've been in CTE as long as anybody in the state right now, and 20 years is a long time. I don't think I've lived out an agreement. So my take on it is a 4-year agreement allows more frequent review, and if you're happy with the agreement, then you can stick with that agreement. If you're unhappy with that agreement, then you have a much shorter window in terms of change. And we know that the face of education and career and technical education is really changing rapidly, and it's changed in leaps and bounds since my time within CTE. So just to sum it up, I'm concerned about the last minute nature of the amendment and how it may impact this original legislation, which a lot of people worked very hard to present, and it is a good piece of legislation, so thank you.
So generally, you're in favor of the Hennessy amendment?
No, I'm in favor of keeping it as is, the 4-year agreement. Certainly, in the logic there is keeping people's feet to the fire to do a 4-year comprehensive review of that agreement is a good thing. If a district or a region, like in the North Country, is happy with their agreement, they're under no obligation to change it. They can stick with that agreement. But waiting an additional 6 years to change it, let's say in the hypothetical, could cause concern for some of the sending districts that may have issues with the agreement. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
And Vasiliki Portanuti.
Good morning. My name is Vaso Partinuti, and I am this Career and Technical Education Director in Manchester at the Manchester School of Technology. Before that, I was the director of the Milford Applied Technology Center, which is the CTE Center, and I worked for 11 years at the Exeter Center, which is the SECO School of Technology. I feel that I have a pretty good understanding of how different centers operate and how this 1661 would affect the way they operate at this point in time. So with that in mind, I would like to say that there are 28 centers that will be affected by this new legislation, and each one is very unique in terms of what programs they offer, their size of, or how many students they receive from their local schools or from the sending schools. But although each center is unique, they all share a common problem, and that is the lack of school calendar alignment, which causes many issues. The most obvious is that without the calendar alignment, students will continue to be unable to participate in their chosen CTE program on a daily basis because there are so many other things going on at their own school districts, as well as the fact that students are not there some days will affect those who actually are there on that day. And the numbers of students are huge. We are talking about something like 9,500 students who have chosen to participate. So removing this barrier of the lack of alignment in the calendar will be very beneficial for all of the students and all of the centers in New Hampshire. And HB 1661 is literally this one unique opportunity to increase participation and remove a very significant barrier for a huge population of our students. With regards with the new last-minute amendment by Senator Hennessy, I agree with Mr. Dodge. It is very last minute, and although it might be the preferred way to proceed by some centers that already have maybe recently signed or a 20-year agreement. For many of the other centers, it is necessary to go forward with a 4-year agreement. And I can tell you that 3 of the centers, Milford, where I was before, Nashua, and Alvine, 3 of the 28, which serve something like 20 different school districts between the 3 of them, and extend even further than that, have been suffering greatly by the lack of the calendar alignment, and second, by the lack of original agreement. There has not been an agreement signed in over 5 years, I think now. So those 3 centers have operating with no agreement at all. And that was because the 20-year agreement is not the best way to proceed. These programs are supposed to be state of the art. So talking about a 20-year agreement is counterintuitive to me at this moment in time. And that's all. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
hearing me.
Do you recognize one of these as what you're working with? I have 3 different.
Well, I guess, isn't the main business here, Mr. Chairman, 1475, the amendment?
True, but I just wondered what copy of the bill we're working with.
The House has amended.
Yes,
We should have
I had 2 of those, but
I can speak to briefly the House amendments. We heard from the directors here. Representative Ladd, Umberger, and I, because we're on that study committee. And these are, and also these are issues that come before the advisory council for many years, decided to write this bill to make sure that students have an opportunity to go to their career and technical education centers, because we've worked out a way to increase opportunities, but also to align calendars. And we had hard-fought discussions on to come to the 4 years, which everybody during the committee that met, then during the House committee, as we drafted the bill, we changed it a lot, and that 4 years was really important and doable. And so what I would like to do is for us to approve, the underlying bill is a great bill. I think that's one of the reasons why it was so strongly supported. That's why the parking garage went on there, because the House felt this was such a good bill and would go right through. So what I'd like to propose, Mr. Chairman, is we approve 1661 with the 1475 amendment. If Senator Hennessy can talk to Representative Ladd before it goes to finance and get some rationale, but they had every opportunity to come down. And there were people from those North Country schools in the negotiations on this. So I'm quite surprised with this. I think it's unnecessary, actually. So I guess if you want, I'll move 1475S.
Well, I'll move we go into executive session,
Excuse me.
if you're all right with that, Mr. Chair.
without objection, we're in executive session.
All right, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion is ought to pass on Amendment 1475. Discussion?
Yeah, I continue to wonder, we go through the expense, $9 million of getting these estimates. But there's a few factors that play into this. One of them has to do with the bill that's going through the process right now, that buying American-made steel, which could cost us 25% more than we would normally pay. The other is this the right time, or if you come up with these quotes, how long can you count on them? Or you're gonna have to spend another $9 million 4 years from now to try to get a more accurate price.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, so, just a note, in the bill itself, the design and engineering for the garage is 1.4. And then demolishing Storage Street, and maybe they can melt down some of the steel from there and use it over here, I don't know. And then the rest of it has to do with the moving into the DOG building, fitting it up and so on. And what I like about this is that, okay, we're getting the design and engineering done, and it will tee it up, because there needs to be serious conversations about the garage, about the costing, about it, and we'll do that through capital budget. And I was very concerned about the hurry up, the 35 million. Chair of House Public Works thought that was a real low ball, but we didn't know. And so I think this way of Senator Morse come up with, let's plan it. Then next year we'll have time. Maybe the money will come from cash, who knows? But next year we'll have time through the capital budget process to really cost it out and see when the engineering comes in what we're really looking at. So I understand, Senator Daniels, I understand the anxieties because any building projects under this, but just to note, the 9.4 isn't going into just that garage; it's going into everything that falls out as well. And I am also convinced Storage Street is a disaster. This building over here is not a good building, and we've got to do something for justice. And I think opportunity is knocking in some ways, and so I've become comfortable with it. But you're going to have another bite at the apple, aren't you, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, DOJ, if I could, Mr. Chairman, didn't testify today, but anybody that's talked to them, they're incredibly cramped and they have no conference space. I think Commissioner Ellinghouse made that clear in conversations that we've had with him. I share the concerns of Senator Daniels, especially, if this is going into the capital budget next year, if we've already spent money to do the planning, and then you start throwing good money after bad if we change our mind. But it until you start demolishing buildings, it's 1.4 million. So it's I think, given what the speaker said about the difficulty of 300 people parking in Concord and not rebuilding on that site, and killing two birds with one stone, moving the Attorney General's office to a more suitable location, I can support this amendment.
We have an ought-to-pass motion on 1475. Did you wish to contribute to the discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for allowing for the little intermission. I wonder two things. A, why we don't use the bulk of the resources we have, because we save a lot of money by doing that. A capital expense, even at the lowest possible rate, would cost us double the amount of money. I think that's the situation there. So the question is, if you have the money and you opt for paying double to be part of a capital expenditure, it's a decision that you have to make if indeed you have other places to put what's left in terms of surplus. It's a decision that we've always made these decisions on the sort of on the conservative side. This is a unique opportunity, obviously, because of the fact that we have cash. That's just my input. And the fact of the matter is, I think that there will be a purchase and sale agreement in place for where you're going to move justice. I don't think there's any question. The long run there, you'll purchase that facility. We're already over there. judicial branch has a substantial rental space over there and runs almost its whole program out of there. So just my thoughts on the issue.
Question, that was Senator D'Alessandro, when you were out, I said previously, and I had some conversation with Representative Graham, and I had such concern, I didn't think 35 million was enough, and I think there's good reason to think that.
Could be.
And some of it is actually gonna be, it's 35 million, but what comes from that, it's not just the garage, it's a lot of other things too. So what I'm wondering is, I mean, that's why I think this is the way to go. Sharing your concerns about if we do, maybe we'll find some cash otherwise, but if we do. But if it seems in finance that there is a willingness to take more of the funding we have in cash and to park it somewhere, no pun intended, that might be used towards this, when we get a price on it, or towards the Justice Building purchase. But, I think there's a sense of, if there is another 25 million somehow out there, that could it be designated in such a way that would allow that flexibility to the Capital Budget Committee to draw on it, so it wouldn't be on the capital budget cap. But that's not exactly above my pay grade, but I'm not gonna be the one making that.
Well, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I think what you say obviously is correct. We do have a problem that has to be solved. There's no question about that. And the fact of the matter is, the liability, I think, that's being imposed on us with the current facility where they park. And remember, I was here when they built that, when you couldn't find parking spaces in the city of Concord, and we rented space where the bank building is now. We rented that space for cars. We used to park them on a dirt lot. That's where we used to park cars at one time. So the need is there. The manifested need in the other areas is quite clear. Quite clear. So there, I don't think anybody battles that. The question is, how do you solve it? And what's the best way to solve it? I just bring forth my opinion. Will I support the amendment? Sure, because it's a method that takes us forward. Do I think there are other opportunities that we should discuss? Yes, and given the fact that I think Senator Daniels, you'll take this to finance, won't you, Senator Daniels?
I think you can count on it.
Right. I can bet that one. I can bet that.
Okay.
So with that, I'll concur. Thank you.
The motion is ought to pass. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Move ought to pass as amended.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ought to
Aye.
pass as amended. Aye.
What's that? Did you take it out?
Senator Waters.
Is it?
Yeah.